This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus.
We're back on the College Blitz. Okay, we've got a couple of games into the season that we can talk about for each of the Triangle teams. Sarah Holland is here, Kevin Holden. Sarah, we've been watching these guys since the start of fall camp. We've been watching the hype in some cases going back to December, and I don't have to walk up and throw a T-shirt over that camera this time, because UNC did what they could do. Bill Belichick finally gets a win. Now, the joke was Bill Belichick goes to Charlotte and wins, makes it sound like the Patriots just beat the Panthers.
Right.
But in this case, it was the Tar Heels. And look, it was, it wasn't 100-0. It was not a blowout necessarily, but UNC did what they had to do to get him his first win.
Yeah, exactly. And their offense kind of comes out firing the same way they did against TCU. Opening drive, touchdown score, and then the defense coming out and getting the stop. And I mean, what more could you want? But then from there on out, that's where the questions start sort of piling up, right? Because their offense then goes to fizzle out. And against a Charlotte team like that, you would definitely have expected a little bit more from UNC. So still some doubts, I think, surrounding them. Curious to see how they're going to be able to do against Richmond this week.
You don't have a rusher over 52 yards if you're UNC in this game against Charlotte. And that's that. There are a couple of things that dominant teams will do, right? If you get a lead and you're in a higher class of football, then you will run it well. You'll probably run for a bazillion yards in a game like that.
Right.
And it just didn't happen for them. They just, as you say, they just were not they were not their dominant selves that they were hoping to be in that one. It is a win, but statistically it just didn't match up.
I mean, 3 points in the second half is just not gonna cut it, for especially as you move down the line. And I know UNC doesn't have the toughest of schedules this year, but you're gonna face, Clemson's, you're gonna face tougher teams, and not being able to, have offense that can sustain throughout the entirety of a game, I think is definitely concerning. Also some, like you mentioned, run game issues, a little bit maybe hesitant play calling, and just, stalling out on the offense is not what you want to see from this group.
A couple of good interceptions at the end of the game to help seal it. It is a win, and Bill Belichick goes to 500 as a college head coach, 1-1 with the win.
Good win for our team tonight. Proud of those guys. They, short week and, a lot of negativity from the outside, but they really just got back to work. And, I thought we played, a lot better tonight. The rain delay was challenging for both teams, obviously, but, things got going, and I thought we did a good job not turning the ball over, which is a big improvement from last week. Played better defense, tackled better.
All right, so he makes reference to a couple of things of significance. Weather was a factor, and you don't want to take that completely out of it, that there was a rain delay. They started 30 minutes late. You've got this team that's frustrated coming off of Monday. They've been wanting to take the field since Tuesday morning, and they finally get a chance, but then they have to wait 30 minutes. Got to be a little bit tougher for them to establish something. It's a small stadium. It's a weird environment compared to what they're used to playing in. Again, we don't want to make excuses, but there were some reasons why maybe things could have been a little bit off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just taking a total look at what this team has achieved so far, I still have so many questions about what they're actually going to be able to put on the field this season. Before the season started for UNC, I had them going 3-1 through their first 4 games. That loss to TCU is what I had penciled in, and then as far as the other games go, I had wins, but now I'm not super confident moving forward. I think yes, they got the win against Charlotte, but I would have liked to see a little bit more of an offense that can actually go out and be able to carry themselves throughout the full entirety of these games and continuously put up points. And that's just not what you saw.
Yeah, just a wild situation there in week 2. And it'll be wilder in week 3. We'll get back to their game against Richmond as they continue the southeastern city tour from Charlotte to Richmond. We'll talk more about that. But we've got to get to another defense that to me has become the story of the first couple weeks in the Triangle. NC State picks up another win, this one 35-31 over Virginia. I've been calling it the conference opener. I didn't mean to mislead. It's actually technically not a conference game. It's one of those weird quirks where basically NC State and Virginia are a rivalry, and the ACC has 300 teams now, so you can't decide who you're going to play necessarily in the schedule. So to keep the rivalry locked in, they kept it as a game. It's just not a conference game. So it was their first game against an ACC team. It doesn't count for the conference standings. Anyway, with all of that aside, it was the defense that did it. And not that the defense was dominant for the entire game. It was almost the exact script of week 1 against ECU. You know, like had a little trouble, slipped a little. And then when the time came, they made the plays they had to make to pick up a win, including another 4th down stop.
Yeah, when it mattered most, they were able to get the stops. But, I mean, what we saw then wasn't the same defense like you had mentioned a little bit there throughout the entirety of the game. When I, went back and sort of rewatched that game, the things that stood out to me was obviously how abysmal the run defense was, giving up, I believe it was 257 yards to UVA. Jamari Taylor kind of, being powering through them. And to me, that kind of goes to show you, like, how teams are going to be able to attack them moving forward, and that they're going to run right at them. And that's probably what we're going to see from Wake Forest on Thursday, but then also, too, how many missed tackles there were in the secondary, and from, I think it was linebacker Sean Brown might have had the most four missed tackles in the entirety of the defense, 15 missed tackles on the day. It's going to be really hard for your defense to be able to win you games at some points if that's the way that they're performing. But hey, they were able to do it the first two games. But as the competition gets better and better and better, I don't think you can count on that. But it seems like NC State's almost going to have to rely on their offense to outscore their opponents moving forward.
Yeah, and that's C.J. Bailey on both ends. Two rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown, and then Hollywood Smothers with 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. So those offensive numbers will get you where you want to go. But like you say, the defense has got to do more than just make that play at the end of the game. The good news for them is they did make the plays at the end of the game. Kean Sloan with that interception to seal the win to put them at 2-0. So say what you will, the defense, did exactly what they had to do over the course of almost 4 quarters, and then they make that play to win. Dave Doran on his defense.
Defensively, like I mentioned, the first half was not good football, and it's really 2 halves when you look at how we played. Gave up 2 explosive runs on short yardage where we both times had an unblocked defender at the point of attack that didn't make the tackle. And so we got to tackle better. We got to be in our gaps. We got to leverage the football, and we got to be disruptive.
So they did the vast majority of the things that they wanted to do. They just didn't do them, I think, at the level they wanted. Now, what's coming up for them next, and we'll get right to this because this is a Thursday game, is this Wake Forest game that's coming up. Now we're talking actual conference football here. In other words, something that'll count for the conference standings. And Wake is an interesting team. They are 2-0, but they beat Kennesaw State 10-9 in their first game. So you're getting like that immediately pulls the eyebrows down. Like, wait a minute, what happened there? And then their week 2 win was Western Carolina 42-10. So I don't know if we've really seen what we're going to see from Wake Forest yet. It's they've played 2 games, but those 2 games may not have told you a whole lot about this team.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I feel like that we can see or maybe expect is some good defense from them, right? They've been able to hold their opponents in both games to under 10 points. And so do I think that they're going to be able to contain a guy like C.J. Bailey, who I think right now has the it factor, talking about a quarterback that's 19 years old and is able to, has proved through these first 2 games of this season, but also last season that, he can run when you need him to run. He can, throw the ball down the field. And what I've seen and what's impressed me so much so far from him is his ability to read defenses. I think that Wake Forest is going to have a tougher time against him, especially that 1-2 punch when you got to throw Hollywood Smothers in there. But it's definitely a promising sign for them that, they have been able to limit their opponents so far this season.
So this is going to be an interesting one here. It'll be a different kind of opponent, a road game, a Thursday game, another one of those things where your routine is a little bit off. Here's Dave Doran talking about Wake Forest.
As far as the game itself, it's a rivalry game. It's the second longest consecutive game in our conference since 1910. It's our second in-state opponent and opportunity to take our show on the road, and that brings new challenges. So for this football team, our first road test and a short week. And so we've had a Thursday game coming out of training camp, a long prep getting ready for game 2, now a short prep for game 3. We have no routine. and that's our routine right now. It's different every week.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. Our routine is we have no routine.
Right.
Right?
When he said that, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
You know? But I mean, you don't have a routine, right? You have Thursday night game to start the season, Saturday, now another Thursday night. It's a little bit wishy-washy there with how guys can prepare mentally and physically for their games going forward.
And then probably the thing they don't want to have, and we don't have to get too deep into this, but the thing they don't want to have on the back end of all of that non-routine is a big rivalry game against Duke, which is not that far off in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I was at Duke this past weekend and I saw they said next home game was NC State versus Duke right on their big board, and I was like, wow, it's already almost here. Like that's pretty impressive, but that's going to be a fun one. And considering what maybe if Duke's able to kind of slip back into what we thought we would have saw out of them in week 2 and week 3 against Tulane, could pair for an exciting matchup.
All right, we'll move on to Duke since we're heading in that direction. Duke comes up with a tough early season opponent, an Illinois team that has come in with a ton of expectation. They think they could be a contender for the Big Ten title. And Duke, this time around, does the opposite of what they did in their opener. Against Elon, there was that half that was very close, and fans are like, oh, no, that's not good at all. And then there was a great second half.
Yeah.
Against Illinois, all right, you could see that first half being at least fairly competitive. And then once Illinois got that motor running, that was it.
One of the things about a good team, a top 25 team, they were ranked 11th when they, came into Durham. Now I believe they moved up to 9th, is they're going to capitalize on mistakes. And that's exactly what they did when, Duke came into this game. And again, first half promising, down by 1. And then, man, that second half killer for them. 5 turnovers. We heard Manny Diaz, kind of describe it as they played as the architects of their own demise. They beat themselves at some points. And you cannot give a guy like Luke Altmaier and the entire Illinois team more chances, or else they're going to run away with the score, and that's ultimately what they did. But so far, I will say some positives coming out of that game is Darian Mensah, through 2 games so far, is completing over 70% of his passes. Still kind of looks poised, even though, some negative things, and the team started to kind of spiral out of control a little bit there. So I think it's safe to say that, they've got their guy at quarterback so far, but it's going to be a big test when he gets to go up against his former team in Tulane.
Yeah, so there it is, right? Like you've played 2 games, put up good numbers if you're Darian Mensah, and now you go back to Tulane. And
Yep.
I don't know, this is one of those things where I think you probably don't get a straight answer out of most athletes. Where if I were to walk up to Darian Mensah and be like, "Hey, come on, it's Tulane, man. Right. This is where you used to play. This has got to get the blood pumping." And I think most athletes would push that.
Play it down a little bit.
It's another football game, whatever. But come on, man. This is, he gets a chance to go in his new situation, walking back into his old situation. And to me, I would think that if I were Darian Mensah, it would be difficult to keep me from climbing the walls.
Right. And Manny Diaz commented on Monday about how he thinks it's always a little awkward. He commented about how he's had to go up and coach against teams that he used to coach, and that it's a little awkward pregame, but then as soon as kickoff happens, all those nerves kind of instantly go away.
So Tulane, in addition to letting go of Darian Mensah after a great offensive year from them last year, have a pretty tough defense, and that's where Manny Diaz is focused and where Darian Mensah will be focused. They both got to try to deal with his Tulane defense.
You watch the aggressiveness they play. They'll run stunt games. Everybody runs stunt games, but the violence that they run it with, you know what I mean? I mean they're running hardcore pick and rolls, flying the way their linebackers blitz, and then same thing. Everybody blitzes the B gap in college football, right? But those guys go through there as if they're being chased by somebody. You know what I mean? So they just have a great sense of urgency.
Great sense of urgency, and that's going to be pretty important because Duke is going to come in with a little bit of frustration, and they also know that this whole tuning up for conference play thing is about to go away.
Yeah.
And they probably don't like the idea of Illinois being their base to operate from when they talk about, okay, this is our game tape getting ready. I think Duke, for a non-conference game on the road, I think Duke is going to come at this with extra intensity because it's going to mean something to them for the weeks down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's not even thinking about the entirety of the history with Darian Mensah and the fact that he used to play there. I think regardless if, their quarterback had come from this school, I think they'd want to come out. They probably have that bitter taste in their mouth, didn't like how they, played against Illinois. And it wasn't just being outmatched because of maybe the talent-wise, which I don't think that they're outmatched that talent-wise, but I think it was more so the way that they beat themselves with those turnovers, and I think they're going to want to come out, have a clean game against Tulane, and be able to, kind of get that Illinois game out of their heads.
Here's what they don't want to do. Too much. And that's what Manny was focused on after that loss to Illinois, that maybe his Duke team's trying to overextend just a little too much.
It felt like trying to do too much. If I had to think of our turnovers, which to me, the game is decided on 6 or 7 plays. It was either holding onto a ball too long and not throwing it away or just scrambling or whatever. A couple just doing extra things, trying to fight for extra yards. Again, all good intentions, right? No one was doing anything poorly, and I think again, you have to credit Illinois, the way that they protected the ball, the way that they attacked the football. But like I said, it's just those were the plays that were just so backbreaking, not just because of the turnovers, but because of where they happened, either setting them up with short fields or taking away scoring opportunities with us when we're in the red zone.
I'll say really coming out second half, we didn't come out like we needed to. Came out a little flat, and they just jumped. They're a good football team too. They practice also, but we learned from our mistakes, and we will learn from our mistakes. Get back to the film room and prepare for Tulane next week. I feel like losses is sometimes what you need to bounce back. You got to be put in adverse situations just to test you a little bit. So throughout the week, we still plan to win every game of the year. And that's the goal, and that's what we're going to stick to, ACC championship and get into the playoffs and make a run for it. So we're going to take it as a learning experience and move on.
Good points there. That a loss early, yes, can be overall beneficial because it can snap you back to reality. We've seen teams, looking at you, Colorado, back in the day a couple of years ago, where they were winning, several games in a row and got all this hype behind them, and then when the first bump in the road came, everything just fell apart.
Yeah, I think it can also teach you maybe who the leaders are in the locker room and how they're able to respond, after a loss like that. I think Darian Mensah is probably one of those guys. How can he, be able to, control the locker room and keep his guys confident moving forward? I will say one of the positives, and I believe I touched on this earlier in the show, but Andrew Anthony, 2 touchdowns, I believe over 50 yards receiving, and he spoke with the media after the game, and he had that beautiful highlight reel toe tap at the back of the end zone. But it's really nice, seeing the progression of some of these Duke receivers. Darian Mensah being able to really spread the ball. He did that in week 1, also did it in week 2. So he has a couple of reliable pass catchers that, he can rely on week in and week out. Week 1, it was Cooper Barkate. I think this week it was a little bit more of Andrew Anthony kind of getting in the mix there. But I'm excited to see the progression of how this continues to move forward. And, is it Barkate and Anthony that kind of show up as those 2 main guys for him?
It does look like this offense can evolve as it gets toward ACC play for sure. All right, quick break. When we come back, we've talked a little bit about some of the games next week. We have not really done much with UNC. We'll talk about their matchup with Richmond and get you ready for the rest of the weekend in college football in this part of the state. And we'll do that in just a moment here on College Blitz. Back on the College Blitz, week 3 of college football this weekend. Along with Sarah Holland, I am Kevin Holden, CBS 17 Plus, talking. Well, we've gotten into a lot of the stuff in these previous games from last week, but this week is a bit of a different set of challenges. There's nothing when you're talking about massive matchups. NC State, Wake Forest obviously has the biggest meaning just because it's conference, but UNC has something interesting here that I want to chat about because UNC took care of one thing on their list. They checked a box. They won a game. Yeah. And they won it at Charlotte.
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily win it convincingly, but whatever. It's a win, right? But now they got to do something different for the other boxes, which is this. They're coming back home to play Richmond on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Now, the first game, the TCU game, because of how it finished and because of all those fans leaving in the 3rd and 4th quarter and the taste in the mouths of some of these fans, that sort of thing, winning at home and winning convincingly is really maybe even more important than doing that at Charlotte. Like, this is the week where they can kind of exercise a little bit of what happened to them against TCU.
I had that penciled in as a preview. You have to have a convincing win because this is a team, FCS team in Richmond, that's coming to your home stadium. Like you said, everyone probably has a bad bad taste in their mouth after what happened against TCU, and you just need a convincing win. You need to come out there and like plain and simple, you just got to beat this team. Like it's not just get a win. Okay, we got a 17-3 win again. Like no, you gotta or a 20-3 win. You gotta actually have a convincing win. Offensive consistency. I need to see it all throughout this game, not just the first drive and then sputtering out and then okay, yeah, let's put up a couple field goals to end the game.
Second drive touchdown might be one of the best things they can do because they've been so good at first drive touchdown.
First drive, second drive, and kind of be able to sustain that success throughout the entirety of just the first half alone, right? It's not just being able to put up points in the first drive and then letting it sputter out throughout the first and second quarter. Like, I think at halftime they should have a sizable lead over Richmond. Gio
Lopez, good numbers. Pass game, run game certainly will be dependent on to do the same in this case. The other games going on, of course, we talked about Duke and Tulane. We've talked about NC State and Wake Forest. That's the Thursday game. So that one, once again, NC State is the routine is they have no routine. I love that. That's my favorite quote so far of the season from any of the local coaches is that our routine is we have no routine.
And that's going to help you out. I mean, think about that's probably used to an advantage because you're not getting comfortable to just playing every Saturday, right? You're having to, your sleep schedules may be off, how you're getting treatment, the way that you're going about practice. It's like you see it, in the NFL sometimes where you play a Thursday night game, maybe you have to play Monday Night Football or just the way that it goes and teams having shorter weeks and how they used to prep. But I'm interested to see how, NC State's going to come out on Thursday.
Campbell against Furman. That's a home game for Campbell. And Campbell's had a, kind of a wild start to things. They were at Rhode Island on a Friday. They were at ECU this past Saturday. That one was very heavily in favor of ECU, who I think was getting out their own frustration from losing to NC State in a rivalry game. So Campbell will try to get back in the right side of things with Furman at their first home game. That's a 3:30 game this Saturday. And then you have something interesting. You've got North Carolina Central and Fayetteville State. And look, without getting too deep into this, both of these schools have had their troubles here the last couple weeks. Fayetteville State got shut out against Benedict. They lost on the road at UNC Pembroke in a game that had, I think it was an hour and a half or 2 hour delay. It didn't end until almost midnight on Saturday. And then NC Central, after winning in the MEAC SWAC, lost to New Hampshire and then went to Old Dominion and got run right back out of the building.
Yeah, that was not a pretty game. And Trey Oliver commented on how you get to play against these bigger schools, and he just was expecting to see more out of his team, and it just definitely wasn't the opposite of what happened.
So someone is going to get their slump snapped. You know what I mean? One of these two teams is going to get this. So they play each other at 6:00. That one happening at NC Central, and it was really funny because we, obviously we work with other stations to get video of different games. And we had a guy in Virginia who was like, I'll be happy to get you highlights of Old Dominion against NC Central. And I thought, well, that was fantastic. I could show the viewers here the NC Central game. And he sends it, and he literally said to me, he said, okay, so I sent you 6 plays, the 6 plays that we're running, and I also have a punt block in here at the very end that I added for you, which was his way of saying, that's the highlight.
Here's your highlight. There you go. It's the only thing.
Otherwise, you're watching a minute and a half of Old Dominion, and it was just like, woo. Yeah. Shaw also in action at Ferrum. Okay, most interesting game in your mind this week. If you want, I'll offer mine first. I just think NC State at Wake Forest holds a lot of intrigue, not just because it's a conference game, but because I don't know if we 100% know about either of these two teams. We've seen NC State play a good offensive game, 2 good offensive games, and then struggle and have to bail it out with defense.
Right.
And we've seen Wake Forest play 2 opponents that aren't in this class. So I'm going to learn the most about teams, I think, in that game.
I second that. I was going to say that's probably the game that I'm looking most forward to. I think it's also a little bit of a revenge game after losing to Wake Forest last year. Yep. NC State wants to come out and maybe prove that, they're the top dog and that they're going to be able to, come out on top in this rivalry. Also think it's going to be interesting just seeing how Darian Mensah performs against his former team. He's probably a little bit nervous, extra juiced up, and I'm sure on the other side of the ball, for Tulane, they want to make sure that that they can come in and get this win against a guy that chose to leave their program. So those 2 games I'm really excited for this week.
One of the things that you can do, and this is a schedule quirk, but I'm all about schedule quirks, if you are a fan of triangle football and you don't really care about the teams, or you just want to really pay attention to all three teams, you can see them. There's no competition. Like there was this past week when Duke and NC State were playing home games at noon at the same time. Because NC State plays Wake Forest on a Thursday night, UNC plays Richmond at 3:30, and the Duke-Tulane game's at 8 o'clock. So long as you got enough popcorn and whatever else you want to consume while watching a game, there it is.
Exactly. That's perfect for anyone that wants to be able to maybe keep their eyes on opponents too. If you're an NC State fan, maybe you want to actually get to see how Duke performs or how UNC looks, and that's perfect.
Yeah, remember it is NC State at Duke week 4. That's what a big game to have so early.
Yeah, I mean, this time next week when we're recording this, it'll be a very, very fun episode.
That'd be the centerpiece, certainly, of what's coming there. And, of course, UNC at UCF as they continue their alphabet soup tour after TCU in week 1.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for College Blitz. Sarah Holland, Kevin Holden. We do this every week leading into college football. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see you next week.